When we're talking about functions, we want to get the idea across that every input has to have only one output. And one way to think about this is with the idea of a soda machine. A soda machine has a very specific function. You have inputs, the buttons you press. You have outputs, the sodas that come out. So each of these buttons can be considered like an element of the domain or an input. This button's in the domain, that's in the domain, that's in the domain, that's in the domain. And then the output or the range would be your can of Coke or your can of root beer or your can of Mountain Dew or whatever. So when we say a machine is functional if when I press a button, it knows what soda to spit out. It knows to give me a Coke. It knows to give me a root beer. So each button has to have a very specific output. This button has to have a specific output. A machine is functional. It's okay if I have a couple buttons that give me a Coke. You know, maybe this gives me Coke, maybe this gives me Coke, maybe this gives me Coke, this gives me root beer, this gives me Mountain Dew. That is a functional machine. What would not be okay is if I pressed a button and sometimes when I press the button, I got a Coke or a Mountain Dew, and other times I got a Coke. That would not be a functioning machine. And that's the basic idea. A relation is a function if every single input only has one output. So you have one output, you have one output, you have one output, you have one output, you have one output. That's a function. It's not a function if you from the input have two outputs or you have two outputs. As long as every single x only goes to one y, even if multiple x's go to the same y, that's okay. That's still functional. If any specific x ever goes to multiple y's, that's not a function. When we look at it from the more abstract sense, it could be tables or it could be mappings, but like basically these are like our buttons, our inputs, and these might be our outputs. This would not be a function because this same input has two different outputs. Whereas this guy would be a function because this input has like there's only one 3. If you tell me 3, I know to tell you 7. If you tell me 2, I know to tell you 6. Anything you could tell me as the input, I know what the output is, even if there's an output that's repeated. This guy, not so much, because if you tell me 2, I don't know if I should tell you 5 or if I should tell you 4. You know, when we have a mapping, same idea. If I have a number 1 and I know it goes to say 5, if I have a 2, I know it goes to say 3, and that's all there is, then this is a function. But if this 1 goes to 5 and also goes to 3, now it's not a function. That's like a button that gives me sometimes a Coke, sometimes a root beer. This is like me pushing a 2, sometimes getting a Mountain Dew, sometimes I get a Sprite. So that's basically it. When we say every input has one output, but it's okay if multiple inputs give the same output, that's what we're talking about.